When Clayface's name is mentioned, you think of the horror actor Basil Carlo or the shapeshifter Faith Matt Hagen. But there are so many more Clayfaces, so many names. And as I do the top 10 best Clayface stories, you will discover the other Clayfaces. Maybe not all of them, maybe 4 of them, maybe 5 of them. You already know that Mr. Rose did his own top 5 best stories of Clayface, and so there will be stories mentioned in here that he already mentioned in his own list. Also, the Real Super Sam did a top 5 best stories video on Clayface as well, and so there will also be stories that he did that will also be on this list. Based on this list, this is all based on my opinion, and your opinion on the stories are very different. This is from my least liked to the one I like the most. But with further ado, let's get started with number 10. Coming at my number 10 is Batman issue 550. The story title is Chasing Clay. Writer is Doug Manek, and the artists are Kelly Jones and J.H. Williams III. What's funny about the story is that I own this own issue, and I thought this was either Basil Carlo or Matt Hagen as Clayface, but it's neither of them. The story's more about Cassius Cain, and it all starts of him as a lab subject, to which he's held under in the DEO, which is the Department of Extranormal Operations. They take a piece of him off, as it's not flesh but a piece of clay, living clay, as if it's its own living organism. It would seem as it's in a case, it would form its own body. And as it becomes its own body, it grows bigger and bigger. But it only becomes big enough to be a small, light clay creature. Two of the scientists notice the clay-like creature escapes and wonders if this clay-like creature has the melting powers of Preston Payne. But as he does, the clay-like creature pounces on the scientist, burning him alive. From the back of his neck, the clay-like creature enters into the scientist, possessing his body, to which a security guard hears the scientist screaming in agony, enters in and shoots at the head. But the bullets only just go through his head, not really harming the scientist. Suddenly, the scientist becomes a body of clay and glances at the security guard that shot at him, to which, as he does glance, the gun that the security guard was holding melts on his hand, burning his hand alive, the gun molding to the man's hand. This leaves the clay-like creature to escape, searching for what is his mommy and daddy. Called by the DEO, Agent Cameron Chase gets the case immediately. And this is her first case ever. Also, this is the first appearance of Agent Cameron Chase. Batman also puts himself on the case, wondering which Clayface it could be. It couldn't be Basil Carlo, and it couldn't be Matt Hagen, and it can't be Lady Clay or Preston Payne, as they're already sent to the asylum. This leaves to Clayface 4, the son of Sandra Fleur and Preston Payne. Now, it's later discovered that this couldn't be Cassius Cain, who is Clayface 5, but Clayface 6, Claything. This Claything doesn't touch people by burning them, but he has telekinetic powers, and one look will make the person melt or anything melt. I almost forgot that I even own this issue, but reading back to it again reminds me something of Creepshow or my Creep comic book, where there is this horrific, monstrous type of creature and just graphic scenery. It's really gritty. It just reminds me of something off of a horror movie. And Clayface just really brings this aspect, or Claything, that is. However, I don't really like the fact that there's so many Clayfaces, though I'll admit the superpower of this Claything looking at people telekinetically and able to melt them or an object is really scary. Though I wouldn't say this is a horrible comic book. It's a great comic book. It's a great story. And if you like dark, gritty stuff, or, just dark stories in general, I really do suggest that you read this. Coming at number 9 is Legends of the Dark Knight, issue 89 and 90. The story title is Clay. Writer is Alan Grant, and artist is Quique Alicanta. This two-parter story is a retelling of Matt Hagen and his origin story. Also, the first meeting with Batman and Matt Hagen. Matt Hagen wasn't a treasure hunter in this one, as he was in his first appearance. In fact, he was a two-time crook, and he had a boss in the game. It turns out that he hides diamonds in the sea for his boss, Sinus, but he decides to turn his back on him. His boss finds him and he has his men shoot at Matt Hagen, to which Matt Hagen escapes. Finding no other way to breathe, Matt Hagen finds the entrance of a cave. During his escape, Matt Hagen's girlfriend is captured by Boss Science. Matt Hagen discovers a pool of some substance and tries to avoid to even fall into it, but fails. As he falls in, he is filled with this liquid throughout his body. And as he comes out, he is this mysterious creature. He later discovers that he's made out of clay, shaped into anything and whatever he wants. He can go on heists, and if he's shot by bullets, it won't affect him. He becomes power hungry. There is, however, a limitation to his power, and being power hungry, he enters it more, loving to become this Clayface. Even though the story isn't ranked higher than it should be, I want to say that this origin story is a pretty decent origin story, a really good origin story, and more descriptive, if not a lot better than the first appearance origin story that you would get of Matt Hagen. The story really explains a lot about Matt Hagen, who he is on the inside, and now becoming this Clayface. The monster is just coming out. And it's funny, even though the story is fiction, it really describes some people in real life. Sometimes power can really make someone go mad, or sometimes power can really show the true colors of a monster that you have never known that they were a monster before. Of course, Matt Hagen's poor girlfriend didn't see this in him, but it was there all along, and that's what he was trying to tell her, that he has always been this monster. She's just finding it out now. But also, if you're a fan of Matt Hagen, I do highly recommend that you read this origin story of him. Coming at number 8 is Secret Origins issue 44. The story title is The Tragic, though amusing history of Clayface 2. The writer is Dan Raspler, and the artist is Beam89, which just sounds like some PlayStation gamer tag or just some gamer tag you would have online. This issue takes 4 short stories of each member of the Mud Pack, from Basil Carlo to Matt Hagen to Preston Payne and even Sandra Fuller, retelling their origin story. This also takes place before the Mud Pack even becomes to be. Therefore, this could be a prologue leading to the Mud Pack. It's all over the news that there is a Captain Teddy Shaw that found treasure at a sunken ship over at the Bermuda. Seeing this as an opportunity, Matt Hagen hopes to find a Spanish sunken ship, to which Matt Hagen studies up about. The Spanish ship is called the Ballena Hermosa. He robs a motorboat, killing the captain of the boat, and upon discovering the sunken ship, he finds a treasure chest. There's a note inside of it. And due to his disappointment of hoping to find gold, he doesn't find gold, but finds jars of some type of substance. The substance is some clay-like substance, and it burns and itches him. He escapes and flees onto the motorboat, to which he discovers that his head is no longer there, but made out of goo. As he enters onto the motorboat that he robs, his head forms into a clay-like substance, as well as his whole body. He looks at a mirror and sees his face is this monstrous brown-like goop. Due to the results, he grabs a revolver and tries to kill himself. Instead of the bullet going off and killing him, it doesn't affect him, as he's now bulletproof. With curiosity, he wonders if he could turn his body back to Matt Hagen,
after making the faces that he did, and he succeeds at it.
To which Matt Hagen goes and robs a bank. But as he escapes, the cops that shoot him can't really affect him. With Batman on the case, he finds a clay-like substance to which Matt Hagen was walking away, disguised as a grandma. He wasn't very good at hiding his tracks, and Batman comes up to him. That's when Clayface is refilled. Clayface knocks Batman out cold and runs into a ceramic shop. Not really paying attention to what he does, and Batman following him from behind, he goes into a furnace. The funny thing about this is that Batman warns him not to go in there, but he goes in there anyways. He's locked in there. Batman can't really save him, so he gets burned alive. But he does get rescued later on and sent out from the ambulance. The clay-like body is more like a shell, because when he's released and falls out of the ambulance car, he becomes normal Matt Hagen once again. The funny thing about this is that Matt Hagen didn't learn from his first lesson and goes for round 2. So when he goes on a full heist, Batman's waiting for him in the alley. Clayface thinks he can escape from Batman and run away, only to get run over by a bus. Even though he's flattened like a pancake, he goes ahead and does it again for another heist, only to get smashed by a piano. I pretty much just explained most of the story. It's just Clayface going time and time again trying to do these criminal activities, trying to become this big threatening type of villain, but it's just failed heists over and over again because he doesn't pay attention to his surroundings. Now, I do think that he would succeed at what he does if he paid attention to what he's doing, but it just really expressed that this type of Matt Hagen is not really bright. I do feel sorry for this type of Clayface, but also at the same time, I did laugh at the story. This is a great story, a really great origin, and it's very amusing, and yeah, it is very tragic of what happens. Also, if you love humorous stories and want to get away from the dark and gritty, serious stories, well, this story is right up your alley. And just like the other stories I will be talking about, even the ones I talked about before, I highly recommend that you read this one. It's a great story nonetheless. Coming at my number 7 is Batman One Bad Day, Clayface. Writer is Colin Kelly and Jackson Lanson, and the artist is Stren Manico, or however you pronounce it. This is based around the Killing Joke, where he says there's a one bad day for someone to go mad, and basically there was other villains that had their story. This is Clayface's. The story starts with Basil Carlo as a waiter. He's been auditioning for a part he really wants, and a friend of his is auditioning for the same thing. As he goes to audition, he takes his role seriously, as he's auditioning for Red Hood, or really the origin of Joker. They seem to like the role, but they want him to be a bit more comedic, less serious, more toned down. In his defense and anger, he says that the Joker guy is a murderer, a monster, and people need to see it that way, the truth. His friend who was a comedian is Corey, who auditioned as well, got the role of the movie. Basil Carlo wasn't very happy, and swallowed him whole with clay. Basil Carlo takes on the form of his friend, and the very next day, he goes to act as Corey, being the character he is, Red Hood. The director isn't very happy about this, as the actor is acting a bit odd, too different, not whimsy, not relatable to the film, but taking his role very seriously. Basil Carlo was fired immediately because he was in an argument. The woman that hired him wasn't very happy and told him to know his place. This all took place in the movie trailer, and due to his anger, he swallowed her whole, taking form of her. In anger due to an argument that the director and Basil Carlo had, because Basil Carlo has a plan, a dream for his role, he goes out to strike him next. The revenge is so bad that he kills one of the crew members, and transforms into them inside the movie studio, the corpse could be seen in front of the director. Of course, the director, or Basil Carlo, formed into the director, talks to the film press, the film board, the ones who acknowledged or allowed him to make this movie in the first place. However, the film board, who canceled the movie later due to certain complications, said that they're doing what the fans want. If they want garbage movies, that's what they get. And in disagreement, Basil Carlo kills the man. I pretty much spoiled most of the story, and I didn't know how to explain much about the story without spoiling a lot. Pretty much to explain about the story is that Clayface has one bad day. His one bad day is that no one's really agreeing to his plans. No one's really agreeing to his vision. He even got denied for his auditioning because he took his role very seriously, and he even tells the woman who plans this movie that this is what he wanted. This is his vision. That Joker shouldn't be this whimsy, comedical, romantic, let's taken seriously type of movie villain. That he should be this sorrowful, depressing, serious, agonizing type of character. That people need to feel what Basil Carlo feels about the character. And due to this argument, it really leads to a killing spree. That is Basil Carlo's one bad day. And number 6 is Detective Comics Annual Issue 1, made in 2016. The story title is Clay, made by James Tynion IV and Eddie Barros. This is a retelling, a more modern version of Basil Carlo's origin story told by the Rebirth universe of DC Comics. The story starts with Basil Carlo as a kid. He's in a room that he's not allowed in, but his father doesn't mind as he enters in. He shows off all his movie props from horror flicks. His secret is a chemical that he uses. It's all from his face. Using the chemical, it stretches out his face using a creepy smile. He says that he wasn't good with smiles, and that's why he's in the horror genre. He has a word with his son to share the secret with him, that he's a monster inside and the out, and that Basil will be too because, like father, like son, he also tells the son never to show the monster he is. As years pass, Basil Carlo is a famous actor, a young famous actor. Unlike the other comic books where he's a little bit older, this one shows a young celebrity with a spark. He's also romantically involved with a woman named Glory. He tells her about Second Skin Productions in St. Clair, how he's nervous if he's going to get the role or not. One day as he is driving his car, he gets good news. He was accepted for the role. He tells Glory about it, but as he gets good news, he also gets bad news, and it causes a big distraction. He gets bad news that his father was found dead in his apartment. This led him to crashing his car. Basil, waking up in the hospital, staring at the mirror, he sees his face all scarred and burned. His agent says that he's going to cancel his role for the production because he thinks no one wants a man with that face. Basil Carlo visits Vincent Carlo's house, who happens to be his father. The landlord makes a comment about Basil Carlo that, with a face like that, maybe Vincent was lying about Basil being a movie star. Basil also disguised himself to not leave much attraction to anyone, or the fact that he doesn't want anyone to see his face. But as he enters into the apartment, he enters a room where all the chemicals were. The same chemicals that molded his father's face into anything, any shape he wanted. The chemical is called Renew. In desperation, he doesn't think what the chemicals are made of, or the side effects of what it could cause. Having a putty of wax, he pours the chemical all over it, picking up the putty and rubbing it all over his face. Entering into Second Skin production office, there is St. Clair and also Basil's agent. The agent is shocked because Basil's face is normal when it was scarred at the hospital. The thing is, with the chemical that he uses, he has to use it constantly. It becomes an addiction as if it's his own personal drug, driving him mad. However, it seems that he used all the Renew that he had and needs more.
which is led over at Tigrit Chemicals. Even though he uses the recipe Renew as he enters the facility to look like a security guard, Batman catches him and punches him in the face. Batman sees the real face of Basil Carlo, all scarred. This shocks Batman. He wakes up chained up on the hospital bed and asks for a mirror. The mirror is received by St. Clair, along with a newspaper about his incident. She claims that she didn't care about his face, even if it was scarred, that she was still going to give him the role no matter what. But due to his criminal record, or what he did out in desperation, she's going to cancel the production. She's going to cancel him. And that if anything were to happen in the future, she hopes that he will never get a role in any type of film due to what he did. Somehow Batman was in the room. He tells Basil that he has to make a choice, to be the good person or to be the bad person, to be a hero or to be the monster that he sees himself to be. Basil lashes out at Batman, tells him that there's no way to turn back. He lost everything. He was a famous movie actor. He can't get that back anymore. He's a monster now. However, Batman says that Basil isn't a monster, that he's just sad and afraid. He's afraid because he doesn't know what he's going to do anymore. Told by Batman, the chemicals that Basil was using, Renew, causes the person's neural pathways to mess with their emotions. That's the reason why Basil was lashing out. This chemical is made by Rowan Taggart, which he was illegally experimenting on the chemicals, but is now behind jail. Batman also tells Basil that he has two choices: to go on with his life and act like the monster that he thinks people will see him, or talk to Harvey Dent, District Attorney. Basil does take Batman's advice, but for the wrong reasons. Basil Carlo holds a woman hostage as he enters into the District Attorney building. Two guards shoot at him that work for Taggart. Even though he gets to all the chemicals in the evidence room, they all get shot at, spilling all over his body, turning him into Clayface. I feel like this is a retelling of Batman the Animated Series with Matt Hagen, except for it's with Basil Carlo. And in my opinion, probably a better version, one that makes sense, because Basil Carlo is the actor after all, not Matt Hagen. Matt Hagen is the treasure hunter, the thief, and that should be that way to separate those two, because if they don't separate, there's confusion with the fans, as there has been over the years of who Matt Hagen is and who Basil Carlo is. And I think this rebirth story really furthers out of who Basil Carlo is, give him a proper origin story, and even an origin story that's pretty good nonetheless and makes sense in my opinion. Another detail I really like about the story is that the car accident makes him deformed, and that's the reason why he was obsessed with the chemicals and finding them. At number 5 is Detective Comics issue 40 and 49, The Murders of Clayface and Clayface Walks Again. Writer Bill Finger and artist Bob Kane.
Depending on the people, they might separate these two stories for their own story, but to me, I thought that issue 49 was a two-parter to the first story, as it pretty much just continues on months later from there. There's a film being played, which is going to be the remake of The Terror. There's a figure around dressed as a terror, going around and killing many actors and actresses. The first of the many victims is Lorna Dane, which the lights go out when she dies.
Batman and Robin heads to Roy Byner's house, who happens to be her ex-boyfriend, another actor. The two broke up earlier. Batman and Robin believe that this Roy Byner, her ex-boyfriend, is the killer, but find him in the closet hanging. They ask him who did this, and to which he answered, Clayface. The two head back to the studio to investigate, but when Robin confronts Clayface, he's thrown off the castle, along with Clayface, drowning. Batman comes to save Robin. Waiting high on the beams to kill Julie Madison and throw a dagger at her, or stab her to death, Batman and Robin awaits him and knocks the killer out. It would seem like that at first, but as they find on the beam, Batman and Robin are being filmed by the director,
Clayface takes an advantage to escape by a rope, but fails miserably as Robin knocks him out. Dangled up in the rope, the two take off the makeup, refilling Basil Carlo. The actor of the original Terror, he hates how there's going to be a crappy remake, and so that's the reason for his killing. Sent off with a prison ambulance, the vehicle crashes down a cliff and into a tree, freeing Basil Carlo last, to where he takes the makeup and the costume as Clayface once again. His motivation is to kill Julie Madison, who's now Portia Storm, as he failed to kill her last time, and he won't make that mistake again. These are one of the very few stories, in my opinion, that fits very well when it comes to their very first appearance. It may not be an origin story, but it really does describe of who Basil Carlo is in not so many details. It shows his motivations, it shows his personality, and it shows why he has a certain type of revenge. Now, I know there are other stories that play out with the similar story and try to be more descriptive. Some succeed and some fail. But in this case, I like how this story doesn't have to be too descriptive, but it does have some details. It also feels like a classic horror movie all over again, and that's probably why I love the story nonetheless. At number 4 is Detective Comics issue 604 to 607, the story arc called The Mud Pack. Writer is Alan Grant, and the artist is Norm Breyfogle. I feel like The Mud Pack is one of those stories, when it comes to comic book readers and Clayface, this will always pop up in someone's mind, being one of the biggest recommendations. The story plays out with 4 Clayfaces: Basil Carlo, Matt Hagen, Preston Payne, and Sandra Fuller. However, Matt Hagen's out, he's dead, as this story plays out from the tragic though amusing story of Clayface 2. The whole point of Basil Carlo teaming up with Preston Payne and Sandra Fuller is to get rid of the Batman. To give a bad rep to Batman, the two go on a heist, Sandra Fuller possessing the powers of who Batman is, and that being her power to possess anyone's powers and who they are, how they speak, while Preston Payne, on the other hand, plays as some sort of muscle man to take them out easily. All in reality, Preston Payne is under a hypnosis, as Sandra Fuller has to look like the superhero named the Looker, because if she ever looks like someone else, Preston Payne will go whack and kill someone. Reason is that before the whole breakout, Sandra breaking them out that is, Preston Payne goes on a full argument with Helena and pops her head off, thinking that she's dead. Helena, however, is just a mannequin. She's not really living, but he doesn't know that as he's mentally unstable, which is the reason why he's locked up over at Arkham Asylum, and she's the only one that could tame him. What's funny about the story is that Basil Carlo is really just a double-crosser and knocks Sandra Fuller out, even after they succeed to knock Batman out. Basil Carlo uses Sandra Fuller, and Sandra Fuller, being the fool she was at the time to believe Basil Carlo, uses Preston Payne. She fully regrets it, as he's out of the trance about to beat her to a pulp. She explains what happens, and decides to forgive her, feeling the pain that she felt. This is also the whole reason why Preston Payne and Sandra Fuller fall in love. And while that is all happening, Basil Carlo goes to a research lab, finding a Dr. Lowell, having 2 blood samples, one of Sandra Fuller and one of Preston Payne. This turns him into Clayface, or what he calls the ultimate Clayface. He has the powers of Sandra Fuller, who can shapeshift into anything he wants, but also the powers of Preston Payne, where he can turn to anyone into protoplasm. He is truly unstoppable. This is one of my favorite story arcs of Clayface. I love how all 4 are brought together. Even if Matt Hagen is not in the story, I love it how Basil Carlo becomes Clayface. I think this is also what inspired Basil Carlo to become the shapeshifter he has become today. Or maybe that's just what I like to think. Either way, the story is really great, and it shows how Batman almost died. There's really not that very many stories, or what I like to think very many stories, where Really, Batman needs help to even succeed at what he does. This really shows that all four Clayfaces, or really the three without Matt Hagen, it shows that they were all capable of taking down Batman, and their plan pretty much almost worked. Which is why, in my opinion, that this story is in the high list of my top 5. At number 3 is Joker's Asylum 2, Issue 1, Midnight Madness. Writer is Kevin Snicket, and artist is Kelly Jones. I remember Mr. Rogues and the Real Super Saiyan put this story on their top 5 best stories list. One was higher than the other, but still, I remember how disturbing this story really is. It just brought me to shivers. The story starts with a teenager dressed as the Terror. He wants one ticket to the film of the Terror. The Booth Man, who is really Basil Carlo, says, "Aren't you a little bit too young for this film, kid?" But the kid says, "This is just some crappy, old, boring movie anyways." Basil Carlo turns into Clayface and strangles the kid to death. Basil Carlo says that his name is really just a stage name for the Terror, but Clayface seemed to stick more than just that. What he failed to achieve that he always wanted was to become a Hollywood star, to have his hands printed on cement, to be recognized by many people. But Clayface is the only thing that people will ever recognize, the monster. It comes to where he even murders the people in the theater, saying there's no way his film is going to be filmed in a crappy theater like this. He even barges into the room where his movie is being filmed at. There seems to be a teenager who sees Clayface, and Clayface explains of how he's going to kill this teenager. But the teenager pretty much just says, "Yeah, I don't care, I deserve to die anyways." All in reality, these are just teenagers who have a mentally unstable obsession for Basil Carlo, who became Clayface. They praise him. He is their hero. And so much so that they're willing to be killed by him. They want to be killed by him. This leads to the cult name, the Children of the Clay. This story doesn't have to go into a lot of detail or anything, not even an origin story. I mean, it's pretty descriptive and it does go into detail for a lot of things. It's really dark and it's really disturbing. It reminds me of one of those episodes that you would get from Tales from the Crypt. It's just so chilling for Clayface and also fitting. I think it would fit as a certain type of script story for a future Batman type of movie, or if they want to in the future, since they're making the Arkham Asylum show, they can fit Clayface in there and show a very dark and detailed story like this.
At number 2 is Legends of the Dark Knight, issue 24 and 25, in the 2011 series. The story title is Captive Audience. The writer is Greg Hurwitz, and the artist is Alex Melvey. This story is another retelling of Basil Carlo's origin story, but they're in the New 52 time before the Rebirth story.
Basil Carlo as a kid, he wasn't very noticed by anyone. He wasn't even bullied, and he wasn't very popular. In fact, he didn't have friends. He was more of a ghost at his school. He tried to dress a certain way, wearing a black jacket and sunglasses. Maybe people would notice him then, but no one noticed him. He didn't thought maybe he could get a role in the theater, but he was stuttering and failed. In fact, to them, he was very boring, and that he didn't really have much of a future. He even tried auditioning as an adult. He wanted to become a big star, noticeable, but he just wasn't good looking enough. He was boring, nothing special. With nothing left to do, he went to the Penguin, asked for something in advance, maybe some help. That's when he got a block of clay. Penguin explains that the cube is the source of a power from a temple of skinwalkers who can form into any shape they want to form into. Taking the clay home, it enters into his nose, and that's when he was able to form his face into a monster. He became a big star as he was able to get roles just by forming his face. He even got a role as the Terror, forming his face and body into the monster itself. He became a big celebrity, noticeable by everyone. He got all the praise. But with it came a price, as he had to do favors for the penguin. He had to turn into the clay-like monster we know as Clayface to kill people. And being somewhat of a hitman forming into the clay-like monster, he found it hard to form his face into anything he wants. It turns out he was telling the story to a friend who happens to be also a big fan of his, as Clayface was contained behind glass so he wouldn't escape. Seeing that the body was carried away, he felt alone and depressed. There was a security guard that goes to his cell and gives him food, to which, as Clayface eats it all, he hacks up. Doctors come to aid. Even though that the doctors help him spit out his food, he was actually planning to escape, as the glass is slightly open, and a piece of his clay-like body slithers out. Once freed, he captures a lot of people from the city and tubes them up using Joker gas. This he gets from Joker from the alley. And as it goes through their bloodstream from the tube into their body, the crowd is forced to laugh hysterically. This story really shows what some people would do out in desperation, even if it was some criminal act. In this case, Clayface wants to be noticed by people. He wants to be praised. He doesn't want to be ignored. He wants to be shown. And in this case, he would even just kidnap a bunch of people, come up with his captive audience, and he doesn't care if it harms them in any way. It's also a bit of a narcissistic nature, you could say. I also do think, like the story Clay, this is also a good origin story for Clayface, and I can kind of relate to him from my own high school, as I wasn't very popular, I really wasn't very noticed, I was kind of a ghost, but I wouldn't commit any criminal activity like that. Nonetheless, I do recommend this story, as it's a very descriptive story, and it's a very chilling story. Finally, at my number 1 is Detective Comics issue 478 and 479, The Coming of Clayface 3 and If a Man Be Made of Clay. Writers Lin Win and artists are Marshall Rogers and Dick Giordano, or however you pronounce it. Well, here it is, the first appearance of Preston Payne, which they decided to do a 2-part story arc, and I get why. This also is the reason why Preston Payne is probably my number 1 favorite type of Clayface. You may agree to disagree with me, but I think the first 3 Clayfaces are great, but I don't think anyone beats Preston Payne. There, Preston Payne breaks into Star Labs, as he holds a certain mechanism. It's to help him for a cure. Thinking he was alone, he is dead wrong, as a security car shoots at him, blowing up the mechanism. Preston Payne feels sudden pain and agony, and the only way to get rid of this pain is if he brings it on to other people. He turns them to protoplasm. All the guard sees is a grotesque face under a glass mask, and a grotesque hand. Also in this story, Helena isn't some type of mannequin, but she's a wax model, which means there are 2 different bodies. Otherwise, he's also in the wax museum as is his hideout, and he has dinner with his girlfriend, telling him about his backstory. He was different amongst many kids, deformed, had a certain disability that made him look like some Frankenstein, and a lot of kids were scared of him, made fun of him. Lucky for him, he was blessed with high intelligence working for Star Labs, hoping to start anew and have friends, but those people didn't treat him better. He was hoping to do plastic surgery, hoping they could help him, but all the doctors said that he can't help him. He also saw in the newsline about Batman finding Clayface 2. That's when he had the idea and visit Matt Hagen at prison. That's where he got Matt Hagen's blood. Of course, it was like donating plasma, as he took the blood sample and put the sample into his own body. It was wonderful at first, as he can turn into a handsome man at his own will, mold his face as if it was his own plastic surgery. It was a new revolution. He even went out with a beautiful woman, but later, as he goes on a date, his body turns masculine. As his face, he looks like a monster. The beautiful woman tries to flee away, but he grabs her arm,
Out in his agony, he accidentally melts her. It scars him to life as she turns into nothing but a puddle of protoplasm. Due to turning the woman into protoplasm, he's forced himself to make an exoskeleton. Being mad the way he is, due to the blood transfusion that changed with his emotions and probably rot his brain away into a mentally unstable person, the mannequin is the only person he could touch. He believes she's a real human being. However, he does want to go back to normal and tries to find the same mechanism over at Star Haven, breaking into the laboratory and trying to find a cure for his curse.
I could probably go on and spoil the whole story and tell you how much I love the story in that way, or I can tell you in this way. I think the story is very tragic. It's very sad. And I feel sorry for this certain type of person because he can relate to a lot of disabled people that are just not treated right by society. No, they probably don't have a certain disease like he does and most people, but there are certain diseases where people don't really understand how that person is or how that person feels, and society just decides to push them away. I believe this is why the story is at number one and why Clayface 3 has always been my favorite since the beginning as a Clayface. It's because he doesn't want to be the villain, but unfortunately that's what he becomes. Well, there you have it. That's my top 10 best Clayface stories video. I know the story is pretty lengthy and pretty long, almost an hour long that is, but I wanted to explain as best as I can about the stories without much confusion. However, as I told you who my favorite Clayface is, tell me who your favorite Clayface is, or you can give me your top 10 best favorite Clayface stories, or maybe top 5, or tell me what's your most favorite Clayface stories in the comments below. You can also give me a suggestion of who you want me to do next for the top 10 best stories. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.